the truth is it was a way for us to give something, to be a part of the progress that the Lahui is making. And I remember I was with Jason one evening, and we were just, sitting around a campfire. And as the campfire was dying, obviously we always end up talking about, our families and our backgrounds and whatever. And he said something to me that I thought, that it was refreshing coming from him. He told me, he says, being Hawaiian is the pride of my life. Oh. And I feel the same way, This talk story is full of symbolism, power moves, and kuleana, highlighting how mercy, peace, and restraint play out in a time of impending war. Joining me again is historian Keaweikekahiali Abad. Aloha. We're back. Kehao, thank you for being here. Episode 6. So continuing in this process of wanting to have sort of reactionary conversations to the episodes. Obviously, with your background, I thought it would be great to have you here again, because these are episodes for us that we refer to as, they're kind of like bottleneck episodes. They're episodes that are allowing us to move and maneuver to get to some of these, next set pieces that are coming, and really feeding off of the things that we've seen up to this point. So we opened this episode, right after Keōuakū has burned the food storage and all this stuff that was set up so nicely in episode 3. And now we're like seeing that Keōuakū is really antagonizing and really pushing forward. What was your thought process when you're seeing this, or what was your reaction to?
Well, you're coming off of episode 5 when you see the fire, right? And you see now the beginning of episode 6. It's so devastating. Like, imagine what was burnt that day, right? Now because it's multiple haleho'ahu. And from that one scene, right, you remember that there's a beautiful spread of kalo, and you're still thinking about, this is Haloa, our older brother. This is the gods that their embodiment that was meant to sustain us. And just kind of putting myself in that picture and imagining how anybody, whether it was Makai, Nana, or Ali'i, they're feeling the loss of that. And for an Ali'i, any of them, right, they work so hard to ensure that abundance. And that's the essence of the momona of their aina, right? Aina momona, it has all this extra, right? All this abundance that we're not just eking by, sustaining ourselves. No, it's like thriving. Right. And that's why there's all this extra in there. And this is what Keōuakūahu is saying, no, I'm going to take it out. And you guys were, not able to defend it, not paying attention. And now you lost all of this labor and care and, what the gods have provided you. We're going to take it all one time. So it's a super devastating moment for you can imagine how everybody's feeling there. So yeah, they're pissed. They're super pissed.
Yeah. Well, also, I love that you put it in the context that way, because, some people could be watching this and we have a tendency to look at things from our perspective, our point of view. Well, it's just food, we can just go to the supermarket, buy some more or whatever, but there's so much that goes into this, Yeah. And also it was set up in the last episode, at the beginning of the episode, talking about Haloa and all of that. And now, as you mentioned, it's been destroyed. So this thing that has been introduced is a very important thing for the people, and it's not just sustenance, it's Haloa, it's an ancestor, right? And now in this episode, they're dealing with this sort of devastation.
And it's at one level, it's even, and I don't know if Tracy, if I may be over-interpreting, but I was thinking about that this is what was perhaps stored up as a result of Makahiki, right? Mm. So as the ali'i make the circuit around the island, right, and all of the ho'okupu are coming in, much of that gets redistributed. So if one area might be really specialized in creating, aha, or low hala mats or whatever, a lot of that would get redistributed because they're not going to be carrying all of this and just accumulating and accumulating. But some of it does stay in the haleho'ahu. And so, I'm thinking, like, if this is another symbol of this time of peace and abundance and this time of Lono that's embodied in what was brought together as a result of the Makahiki. And it represents the entirety of Kamehameha's area where he would have been, where this circuit would have been going through. That symbol of all of that time of Lono is now being burnt. And so it just like, I don't know, it just hit me like, oh man, talking about we in a cool mood.
That was beautifully stated, very well thought. And that's exactly what I was trying to do. I actually had never thought about that. That would actually be more impactful. So that's great. All I was really trying to do was to create a consequence to what happened in episode 3 when they're talking with Kalanikūpule, and Kalanikūpule is basically stating and asking what would they do with this threat of Kahekili that is, it sounds as if he's building his forces, getting stronger, and he will eventually come. And he puts that question to Keōua, his son, Keōuakūahu and Kamehameha. And he says, what would you do? Keōua's reaction is brute force, strength, right there. Tell him meet me right here. Yeah, and we'll take care of this. Like, we'll squash him just like we do anybody, whatever. He has that reaction, and Kamehameha's reaction is more thoughtful. And he's even a little reluctant to say it, right? Because he doesn't want to be opposing to his cousin, and in essence, his brother, he doesn't want to be opposing. So he's a little hesitant. But the truth is he's like, well, I have thought about it, and this is what we're doing. We've been storing, we've been prepared because of the situation that's happened in the past,
That's right. That's right.
And so with him speaking up about that, Keōua is processing this and like, oh, okay. All right.
Not anymore.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, there were probably other ways to bring this out, but we really just wanted to feel that Keōua was in essence slapping him in the face. He's not
totally.
He's not doing a truly blatant act of war, because in this episode, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but there's Kamehameha's implementation of Māmalahoe, right? And if we had Keōua do something too extreme, well, this is episode 6. We're going to have to go to war in episode 7, right? But realistically, we knew we had to push this to episode 9. So we had to make it feel more like a slap in the face, but not a,
Yeah, not full frontal.
Yeah, not like a true act of war. Yeah, not a true act of war. There's another scene that I kind of just wanted to gauge a reaction from, is when Keōua burns the Māmalahoe of his father. Like, I don't know. Like, I actually don't know how people were going to react to this. So I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, no, I just think about, because in the other episode, right, there's a statement of one of the chiefs when Keōuakūahu has his ahaula, his court assemble. Yeah. And they're debating what to do with Kamehameha, and you could hear that some of them were saying, he's always been loyal to your father's kingdom. Like, you should work with him, basically, or like he has the guardianship of Kukailimoku. That says something. That was your dad who made that decision, and so in that sense of he was always loyal to your father's kingdom, and in this moment, this opening scene in episode 6, right? You can see Kānekapōlei, she's bringing her husband's mahiole, and it's really the embodiment, it's the mana of him in it, right? Like, and you think that's your father's, like, and she's probably worried about what he's going to do and maybe suspects what he's about to do, but it was just so heart-wrenching. Like, this is something that, especially for, like, I think about for a wife and for her husband, and what, this is something that I endear. This is representing my Kane, Kuali, and you should have the same feeling. This is your father's. And yet, why he's going to burn it is because I need to end my father's kingdom. Because it's everybody's imagining what that was and they're wanting to keep that. I'm going to make my own. Because as long as it's my father's kingdom, then Kamehameha has a real place in it like he always did. I have to undermine that, end that. This is Keōua's kingdom. New rules, new everything. The mana of my father, I'm going to burn right now, right here. And I just think wow. I mean, and I know historically, I don't, maybe something like that happened, but man, what a brilliant thing to put in I thought, in terms of storytelling and what among our cultural mea kapu would have accomplished that. Like, right. Wow.
It was, obviously when you have someone like Cliff that can pull that off, and then just that presence and strength of Kekuhi and, playing his mother, playing Kānekapōlei. And I look, it was easy. I mean, that was less about what's on the page and more about what they could do, and that's why, but
so moving.
But I was a little, because like you mentioned a little earlier on something different, but in this case, there's a lot of care that's taken into even making Mahi Ole, and, that the hours of, and the amount of feathers, things like that need to happen. Like, these are not simple relics. These things are, and they're imbued, with that mana. And so, yeah, it was one of those that obviously there's just something so cinematic about fire, and, that it has the ability to desecrate and yet bring new. And that's what that scene is meant to do. And I was just very, obviously the location was beautiful as well. I mean, it was just like, how do you get a location like that where there's nobody else around, but these two people in one place. So
yeah, that one broke my heart. Things will break a lot of people's hearts.
Yeah, no, we're hoping for that, because we need to kind of, the truth is following Keōua is being positioned as, Kamehameha's antagonist, right? He's being positioned, but like, I don't actually disagree with him. Like, I want to show, or at least not necessarily me, but just in general, I want audiences to at least be able to say, well, from that perspective, he's not wrong. You know what I mean? And when you look at Kamehameha's perspective, just as a person, it's easy to side with him because, he's such a good man. But like, Keōua is not supposed to be bad just to be bad. You know what I mean?
There's a logic to it.
There's a logic to it, and an understanding of that. And that this is one of those, like you said, it was how can we find ways to get this out without overly explaining or getting into politics again. It's just more like from a personal level, he needs to reset. It's like, okay, well, if my father didn't choose me to carry his God, if I am not the one worthy to do something like that, well, then who's to say I need this or want this in my life at all, and will allow us to, in further episodes, see where his worship will then lie next, right? If the worship is not in this God of war, right, then what is worthy of his worship? And that's what we get to dig into with him as the episodes go on. Yeah.
I love how you talk about the logic of his thinking. Like, he's not just some mean-spirited, purely egotistical kind of person. Like, he's really, if you think about where they're at in the stream of history, right? Keōuakūahu represents the culmination at that point in time of generations since Umi, of that part of the island, kind of always feeling like, their people, their highest chiefs were not getting the right amount of stature and say in what was happening in the whole of the island. So, he's still like, having this sense of damn Kona chiefs, damn Kohala chiefs, like, no, we, and because there's always that tension between the different sides. And Hilo too, right? The E chiefs. And so you had the Keawe chiefs, the Mahi clan, and there's all this tension. So he's not about letting Kamehameha end up with the upper hand.
Right.
Like we've had too many generations of that, and not on my watch.
Yeah.
You know, so if this is what it's going to take for me to make sure that Ka'u is going to be with the upper hand, then that's what it's going to take.
Yeah.
So I can see that that's, you know, if you're thinking about, you know, what is his kuleana as a chief, it is not to be downtrodden and let this other, then he's not doing his people right? Like, no, I'm going to take on this other side that's, you know, the factions that are starting to assemble on that side with the Kamehameha at Kohala side, and then the Kona chiefs, right, with Keōuakū.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I get Keoua where he's coming from. Yeah. Not a bad man, just
right.
Pretty intense.
Well, I also, you know, we really wanted to dial in on this idea. Now, again, you know, we don't have Kīwala in this story, right? So the idea was, is there a way to sort of put the two together, you know, and just allow it, you know, to be what it is. But we do know that Keoua really didn't receive anything at the passing of his father. And so bringing in that feeling of, like, that alone says something. Like, what does that mean? Like, I deserve something, you know what I mean? And if I'm going to be left desolate in this thing, then what does that mean? Like, how did my father really feel about me? You know, like, these are the kinds of questions that we can ask. Whether or not he felt that way, I don't know. But like, he clearly was stating his, you know, disdain and displeasure for the situation that he was left in. And so, yeah, finding moments to kind of dial that in and making sure it's understood that, you know, if he's going to move forward, he's not going to move forward as a kicked dog. You know, he's going to move forward with you know, his integrity intact and his belief systems intact. You know, and that really takes us into actually one of my favorite scenes. Really is the scene where, well, backtracking a little bit, iana, Kamehameha, they're trying to figure out what to do about this burning. After everything's been burned down. And Iana's first response is, well, you know, we should take this as an act of war. We should actually move forward, and, you know, we have to impose. Like, he's not going to settle down. We know Keoua. He has shown us his stripes. We know what he is. Like, we should do something about it. But then Kekupuohi steps in. And this was the moment. I'd been trying to find throughout the course of all of these episodes, how do I portray, or how do we portray Kekupuohi's position? Who she actually was, because she has an amazing story, and, you know, wasn't able to really dig into it too deeply without pulling us into a whole other direction, or without making the story start to get a little too complicated. But this was a moment that we could have her step in and state who she is, and you know, where she's from and what she's all about. You know, is there much you want to add to Kekupuohi real quick?
Yeah, no, I mean, in real life, right? Her genealogy takes her to Ka'u, and as a wife of Kalaniūpule.
Right.
So she's actually well known in the court, right? So, you know, and, you know, different ages, you know, she might have been one of the younger wives of Kalaniūpule, but she has that standing.
Right.
Like, so Keoua's going to be, he can't not pay attention.
Right.
And Kamehameha knows that too. And, you know, Iana is no lowly chief himself, right? So as a chiefess of that standing, she had a voice, just like all the chiefesses did. And so you see Kānekapōlei, you know, advising at the end of this, and maybe we'll talk some more about that. But, you know, she has a big voice, right? She's leaned on by Keoua. What should I do? You see Ka'ahumanu already multiple times. Kamehameha's listening. And that's very typical. I mean, even so I love that you gave us a portal into that. I mean, there are many instances where you're clarifying to everybody, you know, that some of the main characters here are all males, but make no mistake, the females are also there, and you gave them these beautiful opportunities to shine. And so, yeah, Kekupuohi is, you know, you can see why she's saying, let me try, you know, let me try, because I belong among the Ka'u people.
Right.
They understand who I am. They're going to at least listen.
Right.
And then we of course see that Keoua is too set in what he's planning on doing and what stance he's taking. He's not going to listen. Especially, he's probably hoo-hoo, right? Yeah. She went off with Kaiana. Like,
right.
Should she have stayed with him and his folks? So,
well, the way I always pictured, because look, obviously, there's nothing about the courtship and the what drew Kaiana and Kekupuohi together, but just knowing where she's from, knowing her lineage, and then obviously her status in the court of Ka'u with Kalaniūpule. I always pictured in my mind that she was the catch, not Kaiana. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Like that Kaiana would have pursued her, not the other way around. You know what I mean?
I bet.
And that always made sense to me when you think about that. She would have been very savvy in politics. Clearly, she understands, the chiefly kapu and everything, because she was at the, that's about, it's about as high as you get, to be, around, King Kalaniūpule and understanding the history of, of the island and all of that. She would have been somebody that Kaiana had an eye on. I don't picture her pursuing him, chasing him around. Like, and that's why in episode 1, for example, it's very evident that Kaiana listens to her. Mm-hmm. He goes to her. He not only hears what she has to say, but he bases his decision on what she tells him. And so by episode 6, it's also a way for the audience to start to see how far he's come. Because all of a sudden, right, like he's not paying attention.
Something switched.
Something switched, right? So it's a way also for the audience to start to gauge his arc, what he is doing.
His transformation.
Yeah. And she calls him out on it a few times, and it starts to get stronger and stronger. And so here by episode 6, we can start to see, when they have, this meeting in Ka'u, is really on the surface, it's a great setup for Kaiana, Jason Momoa, Keoua, Cliff Curtis to have a scene together. Or really, on the surface, that's what this is, right? On the surface, it's about, seeing these two, really good actors, very seasoned actors, face off against each other, have a conversation, start to get to know what it's all about. But realistically, what the scene is actually about, and you can see it and you can feel it, it's about the fact that Kaiana did not and will not listen to Kōʻohi.
Yeah, and they beef about it, right?
They beef about it. That's really what the scene is about. It's about him trying to hold it together because Kamehameha has said, give her a chance.
Yeah.
Let her try to do this because Kamehameha wants peace. If possible, he would much rather be, joined and connected with Keoua and let them rule together. Like he would rather that. In the way the story is moving forward. Kaiana doesn't believe it's possible, but he doesn't allow for a space for real conversation. So that scene gets really tense, right?
Really fast.
Yeah, really fast.
Yeah.
I actually love how this scene, and played so well by Cliff, is allowing us to see the thought process of Keoua. Because Keoua is coming out and he's basically saying, let's keep talking about this prophecy, like unity is a good thing. Like, you know what I mean? He's like, why do you keep talking about it? Like,
I don't buy that.
Yeah, I don't buy that. He's like, this is what I am. This is what I am. At the core, this is what I am. I cannot be Oahu. I cannot be Kauai. He says, I am Hawaii. I am Ka'u. This is who we are. We are different.
Yeah.
And
proud of it.
Yeah, and proud of it. And that was the first time, really, when I was digging into trying to understand this character and build and write this character. It was actually the first time that I had the question. I was like, is he right? Is there something to be said about that? Yeah. And is it a justifiable position? Overall, I personally, because we have the luxury of seeing the result of unification, and knowing now that it probably did save us with, Russians on Kauai, Americans on Oahu, British in Hawaii. Like, we would have been so separated, and literally you could have had 3 different countries
easy,
holding on to different areas of the islands. It just would have been,
it would have torn us apart.
It would have torn us apart.
Yeah.
It would have been terrible. But like, they didn't know that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, based on Keo's perspective, I actually really started to resonate with him, because I understand that feeling. There's times where, you want to be recognized for who you are. You want to represent, something. And in this period of time, it's like trying to bring us all together is saying that we are all the same, and we're not.
Yeah.
In
fact, so one of his, Keaweikekahiali iokamoku, who was able to hold together the island of Hawaii in peace. So the entirety of his reign, no internal wars. But one of the ways that he was able to do that was that he held a very light administrative hand over the island and allowed everybody to pretty much run their own nations within that island. And so, that was an equation for success. Don't try to unify in a way that makes people feel under the yoke of or under the the control of, but that they still could have their sense of who they were as ko ka'u, ko kohala, and because even to this day, right, we're still at that. I mean, and beautifully so. And I think that's one of our most beautiful traits of our islands and our people, is that you can go from place to place, and there's the character of the iana that shapes the character of the people, and the mele that come from that aina, the mea ai, and the mea kanu, all the things of the uluwehi. It's just it's so unique, and it's beautiful that people still to this day have these senses. It's why not everybody has the same sense of Kamehameha. You talk to me, I'm my kulaivi is Kohala, so I'm going to rep Kamehameha all the way. But it was interesting to hear, Kaina's sense from Kauai, and got to honor that and totally acknowledge and understand that.
Well, there is, I like how you mentioned that. There is definitely a nuance to people, and that's why there's always that question, like, when you meet, you say, well, who are your parents? Where are you from? Because we get an idea of who you are based on the simplicity of where you're from. That's beautiful. But I will say, as the world has gotten smaller, when you've traversed and moved outside, to be able to say that you are Hawaiian, that you are one of the collective, that's a wonderful thing. That's the gift that we got with Kamehameha, and the unification that we are separate but we are one, and there's
diverse but united.
No, and that's great. But Keoua is expressing, which would be an understandable thought at the time.
Totally, especially in the context. Totally.
And also, I'm sure you noticed this, and it's going to be a nuance that many people won't notice. Maybe a lot of people in Hawaii will notice it, but I wanted to present him as a preservationist, right? So that's why he's saying things like that. He wants things to stay the same, right? Why mess with it?
Why he reviles the mea haole, right?
Right, yeah. He cannot understand why Kaiana would allow himself to be so taken by the outside world. You know what I mean? Like, he sees that as the danger. Not staying separate. That's not the danger. The danger is assimilating the way that you are trying to assimilate. And one of the ways that we could show that with this character, and this is an interesting nuance, is I remember asking Awaiʻolu and our language folks. I was like, can we give Keoua a different dialect? Can we give him a Hawaii based
that's legit
dialect, and I didn't want to go so far that we were trying to do everybody, because it just would have been really, really difficult, and audiences would have a hard time catching the nuance in the first place. But it was awesome, and I actually loved it. I loved that, and
the teas and stuff.
Yeah, and Cliff really sunk his teeth into that, because Cliff actually speaks Māori. He does. He's not a, he's not a
Te Reo Māori.
Yeah, he speaks Te Reo Māori. Like and so for him to be able to connect to the character, and really dig into this idea of being a preservationist, and having a language, even for him, that is showing that he's different. He's holding on to something. Granted, they all would have had that at the time, but it was just a way for us to feel like we are giving him this personality of somebody who holds on to something, And so, only him and Kekuhi. Yeah. But yeah, so really that scene, again, on the surface is about these two men. But you do learn and you realize that it's actually not about that at all. It's about Kaiana's progression or digression, if you want to call it that. He's placing his understanding is really based on the fear of what's coming, and it's causing him to make decisions that may or may not be very kanaka. The very thing that he accused Waine'e of, and episode 3 and 4 about her just like, you've kind of gone a little too far. It's almost like when you witness that and you experience that,
you can't unring it.
You can't, and he's gone so far at this point that we can see he's pretty much losing that kanaka thing, and in his fear. And Keoua points it out really nicely with the idea of like, if Kamehameha has my god of war, that's one thing, but where do you place your worship?
Yeah, and he accuses him to, in the sense that you worship mea haole.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're keiki of Okahaole. Yeah,
right.
That's a pretty big, I don't know, I guess if I was him, I'd have taken it as an insult.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And then, to see the fallout with Kekupuohi, I think it's really important. It's setting up some things that we'll get into in episode 7, episode 8. But this is a great episode to kind of start to get us where we need to be, as we see this relationship is being strained a little bit. And it's really, we obviously know, the relationship that had been budding and between her and, Namake. But that's not actually the problem, right? The problem is Kaiana. Yeah. And that's what all of this is really trying to set up.
So when you were thinking through the plot and just kind of having the luxury of being able to talk with you about this, I thought, wow, maybe I can ask you some questions, because I know you're often in our conversations we've been having.
Right.
You're often posing the questions side. But what were some of your thoughts around setting up the different scenes and the tension between Kahekili and Kalanikūpule, because some of that's already starting up in this episode, right?
Yeah.
That's where some of the interpretation of what could have been happening, right? We don't know. We got to fill in these blanks for the sake of our story. But yeah, what were you thinking there?
Well, realistically, their relationship, I'm not pulling from any direct history, right? But just knowing, all of us are somebody's child. You know what I mean? And, some of us have really great relationships. Some of us, idolize our parents, and, some of us see the mistakes that our parents are making and trying to figure out how do we maneuver through life when this person that, that birthed me or raised me was at one point was the most important thing in my life. And now I look at them, in his case, he's a man. Kalanikūpule is a man now. And so he's looking at his father, who is a man, and starting to see flaws in his thinking, because it's really about unpacking relationships, that paternal relationship. We actually introduce it all the way back in episode 1 and 2, where Kupule feels like he's about his father's errand. Like, this is a good thing. What we're going to do is we're protecting ourselves against Oahu, and then finding out that, oh man, this whole thing was a manipulation to get Kaiana here. I was lied to. It's like that, he approaches him in episode 2, like, well, what is this all about? I don't quite understand, like, this doesn't feel like prophecy, what you're doing. And, Kahekili is able to explain his thought process a little bit, and you can buy it. Like it's okay. This idea that the prophesied king could have been any one of us, could have been any one of our great kings, but they just never stepped into the role. Instead of us waiting for someone to just appear, he has decided that the prophesied one is the person who is willing to give everything to attain that, right? And so that sustains for a little bit, but Kupule starts to see, look, man, you keep going further and further.
Why does Kahekili think he's the one? That kind of struck me because, bro, I don't know if any of the whole Ailona that were, spoken of in a prophecy matches your storyline. What are you thinking?
But see, that's a good question, though, because, again, we have the luxury of knowing the result of history, right? So I think any thought process and any religions, if they're looked at the wrong way or if they're looked at from a different perspective, has a completely different meaning. And so in episode 1, when Kahekili is basically saying, everybody keeps looking for this star.
This hoku velo.
The star that's
comet or whatever.
Yeah, with a ahu'ula, right? He's like, that's the mistake. The mistake is, I am the star. And Kaiana's name is Kaiana ahu'ula. He said, I am the star. You are the feather king. So this isn't about a birth of a man. It's about the birth of a moment, and the moment is now. Right. So it's just understanding that any thought, any prophecy, any belief system can be altered and changed, interpreted in a different way.
Advantageous to a given perspective.
Right. Yeah, okay. And so for Kahekili, I wanted to leverage something real, but his thought process is just off, as opposed to he's just nuts, I have no interest in creating a character that's just crazy.
Just pupulevale is not interesting.
It's not interesting. Others may interpret his actions to be, he's out there, man, like he's out there. But if we know at the core of him, he has a belief, and that belief is that he should be the one to stand. I mean, realistically, if you get to the simplicity of the situation, Maui, in this case, has conquered Oahu, alliance with Kauai. Whether it's happened in this, in our timeline or whatever it is, you've got 3 of these major kingdoms. Hawaii is an outlier. Who should have control at this point? It would be easy for Maui to step into that role, right? At least in the way we're presenting it, right? It would be easy. He's got 3 of the 4, right? The outlier is Hawaii, And so with that being said, it's like, why wouldn't he think that he could be that person? Why wouldn't he think that he could hold and maintain power, especially if he had a belief that his God could grant it, So it really just becomes a question about, looking at an individual's belief system, their motivations, and, the justifications that they can come up with. But from Kupule's perspective, Kalanikūpule is more us, right? He represents like us looking from the outside in going, it just doesn't feel right. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't quite make sense. But from a relationship standpoint, here's someone who would have respected and loved his father for what he was able to accomplish, and what he has been able to do. And also someone who probably is very learned in the history of Maui and, the great ali'i that have come from there and, wanting to honor this lineage and be a part of this lineage. It's like, my dad is kind of moving in one direction, but maybe he's not lost. Maybe he's still in there. Let me just see if we can, fix that. And that's kind of what his aim is in this episode, is to maybe he's still in there and I can try to find it. So yeah, he does approach him, but then now we see that, Kahekili is really going a step too far, even, for Kupule, he can't deny it anymore.
You mind if I ask one more question?
Yeah, please.
So I'm wondering, see, I'm right with where the audience is at. I've only watched up to 6.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if you're going to pursue anything in the other episodes about the relationship between Kamehameha and Kahekili.
Oh.
And I don't know, don't do a spoiler thing, but just, do you want to give us any hint of what?
Well, I know what you're referring to.
Yeah. So we might have to wait to see how that goes.
Yes, because there is obviously a very strong connection. And we are really portraying this history. The story is actually trying to come from Kaiana's point of view, right? So we can keep it sort of tunnel vision in a way. But there's a lot more that can be touched on. And, we are at this point really hopeful to continue the stories, right? And to move things forward. But where we sit in episode 6, there's a lot to be discovered in the show, just in general. Yeah.
Well, that's going to be exciting.
There's a lot. There's so much more to be able to experience. We're only 6 episodes in. We still got 3 more. And so I'm really excited to get into those for sure.
Yeah, some of the juiciest storylines are yet to be.
Well, especially in the conversation that we've been having about, King Kahekili, Kalanikūpule, Temuera Morrison, and Brandon Finn. We still have a ways to go in their relationship and the way it uncovers, and that's really exciting. That's really exciting. So I can't wait to get into that. Yeah.
I love where this episode ends, though.
Yeah, we definitely need to talk about that, because a lot of people are going to see really quickly that we're almost brushing over, Māmalahoe.
Yeah.
And that's why I think I did want to kind of gauge a reaction and maybe talk about, really what that is, as opposed to, because again, we're just brushing over it. But I know it's a hugely significant moment, and I wanted to, in some ways, sort of open a window for us to look inside.
Yeah.
And, people to be able to look into it a little bit more, or people that already know, just, it's recognized that, yes, we're touching on it, but, maybe not in the way that you would expect. But let's talk about it a little bit.
But, I kind of liked how you did it, because it's not like, it's not like chiefs when they issued Kānāwai, these, chiefly edicts that carried the full force of their might and their mana and their rule. Mm-hmm. These Kānāwai, I don't think it was, hear ye, everybody come up and assemble, and I have something to say. I don't imagine it was like that. I would imagine it was maybe quite like it was depicted there, where the highest of chiefs knew that this is what was on Inui's mind, and this is a new Kānāwai, and it shall be. And whether I told it to 3 chiefs or 30 chiefs, it is.
Yeah.
And those chiefs there needed to make sure everybody knew, because that's the new law. And so, whether he said it quietly in the way that it's depicted, or something, much more boldly. And I think in the mo'olelo that come down to us, right, we hear it more in the sense that these perpetrators of who hit him on the head with the hoe, right, were brought to him, and to everyone's surprise, he says, "Oh no, na'ukaheva," right? It's my fault. And there's 2 versions of this story, and I love that you're generous and you use the more poi kind of version, which is, poi is a wonderful historian from Kohala, and poi says, no, he was trying to talk to these fishermen, and these fishermen, assumed that there was ill intent and, tried to defend themselves and hit him over the head. And there are other stories where it was Kamehameha who was, in the style of the time, doing these little raids, right. In the heartland of the opponent, to kind of stick it to the opponent to say, in your very, aina pono'i, I'm able to do this to your people. Where were you? How come you didn't defend them, right? So it was that, there was some of that going on at the time, all the way around, but different chiefs were doing that. So whether it was that, or whether it was, as Poi describes, more like, no, he was just, and in any case, it just says so much about Kamehameha that, regardless of how it was him who said, no, I will not harm these men. In fact, these men should be honored, and I'm the one. And therefore, here's my ha'awina is going to be this new Kānāwai that every person should be able to sleep on the side of the road, right? Young, old, anybody can be as vulnerable as you could possibly be, sleeping on the side of the ala and be left unharmed. And too, it goes back to an earlier Kānāwai, 3 generations prior. Kuali is a famed chief of Oahu, and Kuali had a Kānāwai called Ni'aupi'o. So the highest ranking chiefs, Ni'aupi'o Kolowalu. So kolo is like to hunch down or to crawl. And walu, like lots of them, like makavalu, like multiple. So like all of these ni'aupi'o, even the highest of chiefs are going to need to honor this rule that chiefs cannot just go and make any kind to people.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're the highest chief, Kuali says. You cannot harm people with for no reason. And further, there was this other part about, and you have to feed them too. So it was like a two-sided thing. Chiefs, you cannot harm makainana. Makainana, your kuleana is to feed anybody. If somebody's hungry, that's your job as lawai and mahi to feed your people. And anyway, there's one more twist that I love about it, which is that if you were to say that you're hungry, you're supposed to be fed. But if you had falsely accused somebody of not feeding you, and you're actually perfectly able, like to feed yourself, then you would be the false accuser would be the one that would be punished. In any case,
we could use a little bit more of that.
Hell yeah!
Modern day, right?
Yeah, I think that there's a big ha'awina in there for us. Cannot just make any kind, use the legal system to make any kind and cause all sorts of heva. But yeah, this is, so when Kamehameha is saying this, he's looking back at the history of his people and he's saying, this chief had a really good one, and I'm gonna make it part of my laws too.
Yeah.
In my kingdom, this is gonna be the Kānāwai that we're gonna live by. And just to this day, he's honored and beloved for making that.
Yeah, and but that was when I mentioned brushing over it. It was because there's a rule in film. It's usually better to show than to tell. And we just had him talking about it as opposed to showing it, and there wasn't a place to show that. There wasn't a place to do it. So it was one of those. Well, let's have him kind of like say it as if this was something that happened that he hadn't talked about. Like in the scene, Moku has never heard this story, right? And so he reacts to it, and able to take that poi context and show that Kamehameha is like, no, it's okay. And actually, Kaina added a line in that, and he added, "I'm the one who should be punished. I'm the one who should be stoned." So we did have that feeling of him like, no. If I'm going to try to build a kingdom of peace, then people need to know that the chiefs are worthy of it, that context was there, but kind of very specifically was like, I have to say this. And so it was great. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It added that little thing that wasn't already there, but again, would have never gotten feedback like that if we didn't have somebody like Kaina, that already kind of understood what it was that he was trying to do. And, I know we've talked with Kaina in this talk story session, but that is one of the beautiful things about him, that he could provide, context, as a Kanaka, as someone that, lives and works off the land, and he allows the land to be a kumu for him, a teacher, not only for him but for the kids that he helps. And it's just we were so grateful because, again, he's not an actor. He wasn't pursuing it. He didn't have the same aspirations, like he was not swayed at all by Hollywood. You know what I mean? Like, it just wasn't in his makeup. Fame
and glory is not something you see.
I will say this too, and I didn't mention this in our Talk Story session with him, but he refused to speak English to me when we were filming. And he actually didn't speak English to a lot of people. If they had some base of Hawaiian, he would push it. And even for other Polynesian cast, if they spoke their language, he spoke to them in Hawaiian. And it was just part of the process. Like, he understood that. Well, actually, I say he understood, but it wasn't even part of the conversation. We were trying to lead with culture. That was part of our production mandate. That's what we wanted to do. But he couldn't do that anyway. We never had that conversation with him. Like, hey, like, this is what we want to do. It was just the way he is.
It's just who he is.
Just who he is,
Yeah. That's so beautiful. For the character of Kamehameha, how amazing to have somebody who's an actual farmer,
right.
Because that Mahi sense of him is just, it is so central to Kamehameha was,
right.
and to see that in the scenes where, multiple scenes where you folks place him right there in the lo'i doing that, having that, he was known as a ali'i kuauli, this dark-backed chief, because he did work out there.
Right.
There's so many amazing stories about his intimate knowledge of these lo'i that were part of his favorite patches in Iole. Anyway, it's amazing that you folks have had that chance to have somebody like Kaina, so perfect.
We were really lucky because, again, he wasn't doing it to be in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he actually didn't want to do it at one point because we were really trying to, like, let's lock this in, man. Like, you're perfect and all of that. And ultimately, because he's a busy man, like, he's busy. He runs, a handful of nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
He deals with all types of, educational systems. And, like, he's just a really busy person. And in order to join us, which a lot of people are like, oh, I would love to be in a movie. And, they're willing to give up anything. It was really actually hard to get him because he's not motivated by
other kuleana that matter to him. Yeah.
And there was one night, though, in Aotearoa, I took him out to dinner. And just wanted to, talk with him, make sure he's okay. Because, he was out of place, in the city. We're like in the city, he had to stay in the city. And I knew that was difficult for him. Yeah. So, I wanted to just talk to him and see if he was okay. I had to bring Keawe on that because Kaina was not going to speak English. And what was really nice, I took him to a really nice sushi spot, and I didn't know he doesn't eat rice.
Oh.
He doesn't eat rice. So we sit down, order all this food, and I was like, oh, you don't eat rice? And, he was like, no. So he said, but it's okay. He busts out his bag poi, and he had brought, it was a lot. Like, he brought, like, I don't know, over 100 pounds of poi or whatever it was.
Oh, he came prepared.
He came prepared. So whenever he'd go out, he'd bring his own bag poi, and just he'd eat the fish and
have poi, can eat
bite
happily.
the end off of the bag and just eat the poi. And, for about an hour and a half, we just sat there, chopped it up, and, it was just wonderful. Anyway, as far as, the law of the splintered paddle, it was something I definitely wanted to implement, but it also gave us an opportunity, actually, because we needed to also find a way to prolong this battle, right? Because it's inevitable, right? It seems like it's inevitable to happen. So by him instituting this law, it was also a way for us to see that it was also motivated by, his cousin, the need to retain family ties and all of that. Like, despite, Keōuakū technically hasn't done anything hugely bad. Yeah, like a true
chance.
Act of war. There's still chance. And so that was also the one thing that we added too, was to allow this this implementation of this law of peace and, mercy and all of that was also being enacted to help protect his cousin, unless Keōuakū, does something, even bigger, which, we'll tune in to see what happens next. But that's what it was really. Everything should be a reflection of character. Mm-hmm. And so something as big as, Māmalahoe, like something as strong as this law of the splintered paddle, that we understand what it is. We've heard it before. People have talked about it in the schools and whatnot. It still needed to be a reflection of character. It was positioned particularly for this episode so that it could service two things. One, a reflection of the character, and two, to allow us the opportunity to take a breath and say, okay, that war is not imminent. It's not happening in the next episode. The real question is, when is it going to happen?
Yeah. What's going to trigger it?
What's going to trigger, what's going to push these characters over the edge?
Well, we're still in the Tawheo Kānāwai. I could add one more thing in just because I think I feel a little bit sorry for Kahekili because, we're all very diverse in our, we get our good days and bad days.
Yeah, right.
So in real life, one of the things that he was known for, and along with other chiefs, so we hear about auipi and Kahekili, Kalanikūpule, Kamehameha, all of them having issued Kānāwai in the middle of battle. And that was in times when they're already, okay, we win, enough. And so they would stop the bloodshed. I mean, even though that, imagine your warriors have just maybe seen one of their own get killed and they're ready to go, revenge against the one that they knew and killed their friend. But no, this was the edict. Kānāwai, stop, enough. We already won. Let them retreat and we're good. And so, Kahekili was known to have done that. And then even like you're talking about honoring, which triggered the memory for me because you were talking about how Kamehameha is still trying to honor the family relationship between he and Keōuakū. And so there's an instance when Kahekili is fighting with Kalanikūpule, right? And Kalanikūpule is it's like the second time Kalanikūpule was over on Maui trying to battle over there. And he actually, at the time, Kalanikūpule has control over Hana. So it's Hawaii Island and Hana. And so he's fighting right around the edges of Hana to kind of keep others at bay, right? And so in his attempt to try and keep the Maui guys out of Hana, he's totally ready to get slaughtered. And he I'm not sure what the diplomacy is in the battle, how this works, right? But apparently the fighting stops for a bit. I don't know whether it's, nighttime or what, but fighting stops. And what Kalanikūpule does is to send Kīwala, right? So Keōua's brother, right? In and says, please, Kolola is your sister. Mm-hmm. And that is this boy's mother. Would you give us safe passage? He also sends in Kano'ena's two sons, the sacred twins, iokamoku and Kamanawa. And again, these are Maui chiefs, right? So these three sacred chiefs who have these totally tight Maui ties, which, that was one of the amazing politically genius things that they did was they had these kind of, purposeful alliances through marriage. Right. And so you could have these moments of safety. So you send in these three, and Kahekili could have either killed them on the spot and demolished the rest of Kalanikūpule's troops, or honor them as his own flesh and blood. And he chooses the latter, and they go back safely. So he did have some moments of grace that he in real life. So just trying to. And
I think in some ways that would be a good justification for Kalanikūpule feeling like, things are a little off right now. That's
what happened. You used to be let on.
It really, because you're right. There's a lot more complexity. And I remember having a conversation with Jason in the past and said, man, obviously we need him, to help push this thing along and, to be, to reach universal audiences and all that kind of stuff. Like, it was very important to position him. So telling the story of Kaiana is following him. And it's actually written almost like the way that you would watch a feature film. So a feature film is, 2 hours long, but it's centrally focused on a character. And that's really kind of how we were positioning this story and finagling things so that it's a Kaiana-centric story to follow all the way through. And then, to get people, to be able to digest some of this stuff that's never been seen, never been really dug into, language that's never been heard. It's positioning him. But, I remember having the conversation once. It was like, if we weren't so centrally focused on Kaiana, we could really get into
all of that. All of them have such amazing storylines, right?
Yeah. Well, and also the actual connections and the interweaving of kingdoms. This was a creative choice. And so, because what you're bringing up is actually a natural conversation for people that understand the history. My reaction to it and the reason that it wasn't implemented wasn't for any other reason other than introducing Hawaii in this context and at this level to the world, trying to keep the politics as simple as possible. To try to introduce all of that interweaving means that we have to pay attention to it. So we would have to dive in, and that's just not the structure of the story.
Yeah, hard.
It could have been done, and there may be a time where we could completely do that. But in the introduction of our stories, it just felt like, let's keep it as simple as possible.
Oh, yeah.
And that was really a creative choice. Like, even, for example, specifically giving Maui a color, specifically giving Hawaii the color, right? So their ahu'ulas are different as far as their visual representation, right? So that's one thing that people may or may not have picked up on. But, Kaiana, his brothers, they all have red capes, representing this Maui connection. But Kekupuohi's cape is predominantly yellow. Mm. So you can see that it's actually a little different. But when you go to Hawaii Island, she fits in, right? She blends in with them because that's her origin, right? So we had to kind of create that, Oahu is very earth tone, they're browns and the blacks and, some white browns, like they're representing that. Now, granted, on the big scale, we never really were able to go as big as we wanted, where you could see, I wanted it to feel like if you're in battle, that you could tell which team is which, right? Just like you would in a basketball game or a football game. Like, they wear different colors and you could always see who's running the ball and who's trying to attack. That was the idea behind it, was to try to create that. And again, that all goes to, let's make this as simple as we can. Granted, it still feels very, I didn't want to lose the, what could be considered like the regal nature of things and the intelligence behind the costumes and the intelligence behind their way of life. I didn't want to make it so simple that they were, simple people, but the politics, I wanted to keep it as simple as we could so that as we get into the complexity of character, we're not then muddling it with the complexity of culture. Or the complexity of history. But no, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because, that is a consideration. And I know as we build story and as we build more and more, we'll be able to do more of that. For example, say we're building, a season 2, or let's say we're building a season 3, or as far as the show can take us, we can pull further away from, a central character and start to really kind of build in the nuances and all of that. So, that's the thought process anyway.
I so hand it to you folks in your ability to create a clear storyline where there was so much complexity that if anybody was to try to make a documentary of this, which of course that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to tell a story that's compelling and that invites you into, if you want to hear like the full on version, go check out, Kikumaupuni, go check out Ruling Chiefs. There's plenty of ways for you to learn all the rich details. But that's not what this is about. And I thought you guys did such a wonderful job of. So if we're just reacting here, I was like, wow, that's amazing how you were able to pull things that are so complicated and got all of these auipi all over the place into something that's like still holds the senses of what was going on at the time, the real kind of underlying big kind of currents of what was happening,
right.
Not losing that, but and then building some of those nalu that have to be in there. That oh wow. Anyway, I think I hope people are gonna have the same kind of reaction I did. It's there's so much there to be. It was such a joy to see these stories live. For how long, right? We've been hearing them, reading about them, and in our own mind's eye, right? We can see it pictured, sort of, kind of, but not really, because we don't have enough. I mean, I don't have enough brain space to recreate in my mind what you guys created on screen, and all of the different, beautiful parts of what were those conversations. We don't know. We just know there's the basic story now. I don't know, but you want to know, like, what they have been saying to each other, and how would they have been reacting, and you give us all of that, and we are so ono for that. And so just as a viewer, I mahalo you folks for that.
Yeah.
And totally appreciate the kinds of choices you folks had to make. And I think it's just wonderful to see where it landed. And,
Thank you. Yeah, because that's the balance, right? That's the tricky part. And also, see, like, I love history. I consume it, right? But it's hard to picture even the history if we were trying to spout off the chronology of things. Unless you're really dedicated to the learning, it's very hard to actually do that. Yeah. This long form storytelling. Generally, at least the way that I've always done it, and how I know a lot of people do it, is they consume stories. Not necessarily knowing how they all fit.
Yeah.
What caused this, what caused that. We tend to focus on stories.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times when people want to talk to me about Hawaiian history, they're telling me this like really cool story.
Yeah, one right here.
Yeah. They're telling me this really cool story. Yeah. But the danger of processing history in that way when it comes to film is that I cannot, or you shouldn't, as a storyteller, focus on events. Yeah. Right? What we need to do is really get into the characters that cause events to happen. Right? Now there's a difference. So, for example, if I was just covering a story like this and said, well, we definitely have to have this battle. We definitely have to have this in there. We definitely have to, have this moment. Then you lose the soul of it, which is characters' decisions, the weight of the decisions that they make.
They're driving the ball.
Yeah, the tension and all of that stuff. Like, those are the things that we have to build, because the event is the easy part. The event is the fun part. But if you're writing to those events, you can lose the real soul of it. The thing that can connect not just Kanaka to the story, but somebody that lives in Sweden, somebody that lives in Brazil, somebody that lives, in Canada. Like, they can actually relate to the story if you stick to the core of a character.
Yeah.
If you stick to what the characters are going through, because we all feel these emotions, like, really, if you're breaking this down, it's not really, and
very human.
Yeah, it's very human. Very like when we were pitching this story, now don't get me wrong, we focused on this. This is a Hawaiian story for sure, but that's not actually how we pitched it. We didn't pitch it as a Hawaiian story. We pitch it as this. It's just a really good story that happens to take place in Hawaii. So now the culture becomes nuance. The ahu'ula, the mahiole, the weapons, all just becomes nuance. The ceremony and the things that they were showing these real, like, Hawaiian things, but it's not the story. It's the nuance. It's the world that builds our characters, right? And I think that's really important to note that, yes, so in one conversation I can say this is a really cool Hawaiian story. We're very happy to get it out. But in the next sentence I can actually say, well, it's not really a Hawaiian story.
And yet, because the way you folks did it, I think, like, in that putting on my old kumu hat. There's so many things in there that are, you give us portals, right? Like you set up certain things where if I'm a kumu, I could explore that and say, we see this part. Now let's talk about this. And, I could maybe, then play off and talk about the mo'oku'auhau of this character. Like, see, that's how come Iana is on Hawaii Island when he has to figure out where he's going to go because Keaweikekahiali iokamoku is his grandfather. He can stand there like, this amazing chief is his grandfather. And the chiefs know that, they know that's true about his mo'oku'auhau. That's how come he goes to that island. And you give us these portals, right? So because the integrity of the storyline you folks kept, you guys didn't make up like crazy stuff, right? Like, and so from a kumu perspective, I think there's so many beautiful things that you guys tease up or that you guys open up for us to explore with our haumana, if that's something that I know people want to do, or even with your keiki, if you're a Makua, like talk about this at the dinner table. Like like everybody should be diving into this and saying, wow, I want to learn more about this person or that person. Like, oh yeah, I mean, and for us as a Lahui, there's so many people who are going to have actual family ties.
Yeah.
And like the famous saying, right? If you don't know if you're from Hawaii Island, if you're from Mokokeawe and you don't know your connection to Umi, that's because you don't know your mo'oku'auhau. I mean, so all these chiefs, right? Somehow we're probably connected. These are yes, we're proud to rock being makainana, but somehow there's some lineage in there. So these are stories of our Lahui. This is us. Yeah. And you guys gave us a way to, even if you're just, the main thing is this human story, it's still a story of ours.
The truth is it was a way for us to give something, to be a part of the progress that the Lahui is making, and to really kind of bump shoulders with people that are we value as being, truly paving the way. Like this is, I remember having I was with Jason one evening and we were just, sitting around a campfire, and as the campfire was dying, obviously we always end up talking about, our families and our backgrounds and whatever. And he said something to me that I thought, that it was refreshing coming from him. He told me, he says, being Hawaiian is the pride of my life. And I feel the same way, And so for us to build a show like this, it's really us reconnecting to who we are. It's us trying to share it. And we're not necessarily the best qualified Hawaiians to do it, as far as like, our cultural upbringing and, not growing up speaking, olelo, or not growing up in prestigious halaus. But as storytellers, we're good at what we do, like we understand what it takes to tell a good story. And it just so happens that we have a passion for, mea Hawaii and mo'olelo of Hawaii. And like, we have that. And so putting those two things together, Chief of War is our way of honoring our family backgrounds, to honor the people that have, contributed to that. And the truth is, if we can in any way, step into the space where we look at, like, there's real Kanaka doing real work, and they're like doing real hard things, and there's an activism, there's a process for gaining notoriety and recognition and all of that. Like, we're not a part of that fight directly, but if there's something that we can offer, this is it, what our hope really is that whatever that thing that you can contribute, whatever that thing is that you have, that you will bring it forward, and just throw it into the pot, and let it be something that, we can all kind of partake of. So realistically, it seems like this is a big thing, in some ways, and this is a great thing of representation. But for us, it's small in comparison to the real fight and the real work that's going on in Hawaii. But it's a contribution, and we're happy to have done it. Yeah.
Well, it's a huge contribution. You guys threw in big, and so many of us, I'm so excited that I have more episodes to watch. But yes. I'm so overjoyed by the gift that you've given us.
Well, episode 7 is a big one, and then it only gets bigger after that.
Yeah.
So
can't wait.
Be ready. I'm glad that we had this discussion over these past couple episodes, and appreciate your time. Really happy to be here with you guys. Aloha. Yeah.
Aloha.
Thank you. Mahalo nui to our viewers and listeners for joining us as we dug deeper into the brilliance and burdens of Hawaii's chiefs beyond what was experienced in the Chief of War show. I'm Pa'akai Sibbett. Until next time, aloha.